Hello and welcome to this Thanksgiving week edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards, and my guest today is Marty Duren. That's Duren, not Duran.
Hey man,
He's got a reputation to uphold, and he doesn't want it tainted by any Duran shenanigans. So, Marty, I can't guarantee there'll be no Edwards shenanigans today, but thanks for coming on the show anyway.
man, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, Marty is a longtime blogger at Kingdom in the Mist, where he has written on theology, justice, politics, and current event, leading to more than 1.1 million total page views. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and until recently, he had his own podcast. I was once his guest, and now he's my guest. So I'm glad he's here today. So, as part of our Thanksgiving week conversation, we're going to discuss things that we're thankful for. We're going to talk about food, but not turkey and stuffing. He'll explain that to you in just a moment. All kinds of things can trigger our best memories of the holidays, and we're going to explore a few of those here today. We're going to talk about our favorite music, our bucket list of places to visit, and the best events we've attended in person. This episode is dedicated to all the people who have had a rough 2023 and need some encouragement to maintain their optimism as we head into 2024. So, Marty, let's go ahead and start talking about the kind of food that you want to discuss. What do you have in mind?
Well, again, thanks for having me, Mel. This is a real honor and an encouragement to me, and I'm glad to be hanging out with you here early on this Saturday morning. um,
But it'll be aired on Tuesday, so it's right middle of the day on a Tuesday of the Thanksgiving
oh,
week.
well, all you listeners, then you are blessed because Mel and I were up the crack of dawn getting ready for this. Um, so it's good that we're talking about food on Thanksgiving week. And one of the things, honestly, that got me kind of on a journey to reading about food. So one of the significant areas of my library is not cookbooks per se, but chefs' memoirs and books about food. And the thing that got me down this track was several years ago. I was just sitting at the breakfast one morning and praying before my meal, and I used the age old and well worn phrase, "Thank you for this food you have provided." And when I was done praying and started eating, I was just kind of like, "Huh, that's a people have been saying that forever, but that really would have meant something different to a farmer in the 1800s than it does to me today." Not that God wasn't in charge of provision for my family, but that what it means for food to be provided. And as I thought back to a time when everyone had to grow all of or most of their own food, they were at the mercy of pestilence and storms. Hail could take out a corn crop right before it's ready to harvest. Those kinds of things. And a farmer in the 1800s would be thanking God in that, using that phrase for good weather, right amount of rain, for protecting from locusts or moles or whatever might have destroyed the crop, or bandits for that matter. Whereas for me, I'm thanking God that when I went to Kroger, they had the apples that I like, right there in the bin, all ready for me to pick up and pay for. Um, and the thing that got the food to the table for the farmer was he and his family, or she and her family, would go out and they would harvest it and they would bring it in again and begin to prepare. The thing that got the food to my table was somebody somewhere who I'll never know and never meet planted some food, and then some people harvested that food later. Then it was loaded onto a truck and somebody drove that food. And then it got to the grocery store and somebody unloaded that food. And then somebody else put it in the display cases for me to buy it. And so I just begin to think about what it means to eat in the West, at least in America specifically. And it's just a lot more complex than, hey, what do we have for dinner tonight? And so the Lord really put on my heart to think about all of the people involved in getting food to my table. If you go to your favorite beach place and you eat at a seafood restaurant and they promise that you're going to have um, fresh seafood, and so you order red snapper. Well, they don't go out and catch that stuff and bring it, right to you. It's caught. But somebody prepares it, somebody brings it to your table, and if you want to get really, really deep in it, some fish somewhere laid an egg, however long it takes those things to gestate and grow up. I don't know, say 6 months. Some fish somewhere laid an egg 6 months before that was going to turn into your dinner, and no human being had anything to do with that. Only God had something to do with that. So it just began to change the way that I think about what I eat. So I'm not talking about like organic or inorganic or USDA certified and all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about the process of what it means to get food and to have food and to not be food poor. So, of course, related to that are people who live in food deserts and they don't have access to food, or at least don't have access to good food. And then related to that is the emphasis that the scripture puts on food and eating. So, for instance, in the Gospel of Luke, there are so many mentions of Jesus eating and drinking and being with people who are eating and drinking. And in the Western world, especially, and I'll narrow it down to the states again. We've become dependent on fast food for X percent of the meals that we eat. And so we eat in our car, we go through the drive through. I mean, the convenience of getting food to eat is, almost as easy as walking to your closet and pulling off a shirt off the hanger to wear. But when we go to the scripture and even the cultures that the scripture represents, mealtime was a lot more than it was like Thanksgiving all the time. Families were involved, big pots of food, big plates of food. Even the Israelites, they had fasting time and they had feasting time. Well, we basically just have eating time. And I work at home and I'm the world's worst. I just, grab this candy or that cracker or that bowl of cereal. And this is all between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and sometimes after dinner. Um, so the holiness aspect or the uniqueness, the set apartness aspect of it is lost a lot of times when we're by ourselves. We don't see community as a place for shared meals, for sitting down around the table and being grateful for everything that God has brought to us. So, being that it's Thanksgiving week, this is an opportunity for us to kind of recalibrate. The problem with the recalibration is we isolate it to Good Thursday, then Black Friday, then Cyber Monday. And before we've had a chance to even be thankful for anything in our heart, almost, we're right back to the capitalistic grind of materialism that requires us to focus on what we're going to get, what we're going to buy, who we're going to buy it for, and those kinds of things. So, Thanksgiving is a good time to try to recalibrate. But if we don't intentionally think about how we're going to communalize meals and food and show a different kind of understanding about the food that we do have, and I'm not talking about being, feeling guilty or anything like that. I'm just talking about recognition of the complexity of getting food to us, so that we have something to be thankful for when we sit down to say grace.
Those are all some good words. So, just very quickly, how do you think we should? How do you think that thankfulness should look on Thanksgiving when we're sitting down in front of our plates that are piled up 6 inches high?
Yeah. So it's interesting in Romans chapter 1, where there's that huge long list of condemnations, and God's really angry with some folks about some things. One of the things that's mentioned in that is they did not glorify God in their hearts, and neither were they thankful. And the first time I ever realized, that little fragment of a verse was in there, I was like, "What? This is? I mean, God's like bringing down some, He's raining down some judgment on some people down through here." And then it's like, and they weren't thankful. And so, if you go back to the Psalms, there's all kinds of thankfulness in there, appreciation for what God has done. So, like on a day like Thanksgiving, it can easily be turned into a time of genuine thankfulness, whether that's, like at your house and my house, we'll have somebody who prays over the meal, and we just pause before that and express true gratitude. We mention in the prayer at least the categories of people who were involved in getting that food to our table. We're always giving thanks for the person who prepared it, which is great and needed because somebody, worked away over that kitchen and that turkey. Uh, but somebody provided a job. Somebody, grew that turkey. Somebody fed that turkey. Somebody, for lack of a better term, I'll say harvested that turkey. And there's just a lot of ways that we can really express to God our thankfulness for everyone who is involved along the way, as well as the people who are gathered together and the blessings that they are. For those families who are, who are comfortable doing this kind of thing, you can go around the table instead of talking about football or, the fact that the poor Astros couldn't make it to the top of the heap this year. They
Oh
could.
boy, here we go. And that's how the fight started.
Mel was very thankful up to that point. You could go around the table, and especially if you have a lot of adults in your family, like you and I both do, and say, name a couple of things you're thankful for this year. That the Lord has done in your life, or if your family's not believers, everybody's thankful for something. Just ask, and that kind of turns the attention toward uh, the reality that we can't do everything for ourselves. So that's what thankfulness is really about, is the acknowledgement that I can't do it all myself. When I express gratitude to you for having me on your podcast, that is an implicit acknowledgement that I couldn't be on your podcast by myself. When I give gratitude for a meal, that's an implicit admission that I could not do everything to pull that meal together by myself. And so, true thankfulness through gratitude is a means of keeping ourselves humble, for lack of a better way to put it. And it constantly reminds us that there are people and there's a God. There are people outside of us and a God who's bigger than us, who are constantly involved in helping us along this way of life, even if we don't think about it 100% of the time. When we can pause to be thankful, it brings it to mind and keeps us humble.
Okay, again, some more good words. So this is all some pretty heavy stuff that we've discussed so far. I want to lighten it up a little bit
Okay.
and get back to
I'm going
some
to
of
get some
the
oatmeal.
bullet some bullet points that I mentioned at the top of the show. So let's start off by talking about music.
Okay.
So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about from this point forward are certain non-physical things. For the most part, they are music, they are memories, they are hopes and dreams. So let's talk about music. Talk about some of our favorite albums, music albums of all time. But I want to start off talking about the Beatles because this has been a big week for the Beatles. I'm a huge Beatles fan. For anybody who knows me on social media, uh, and this week the Beatles released a new song taken from a demo that John Lennon recorded at his home in 1978. And it's only because of technology that was invented
Right.
in 2022 that we're able to put together a song like this. So that's the part that's the most fascinating to me. The Beatles were innovators in the
Hmm.
60s with all the newest technology. And almost 60 years later, their last song is another technology innovation recording. That, the song itself was sort of middle of the road, I thought, but the idea of being able to extract a voice using artificial
Hmm.
intelligence and then having the two living members record over that is pretty mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use that to lead it.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
watched the video, yesterday, I think after you had tweeted it actually. The video is super. I mean, the ability, I mean, Peter Jackson's just a level beyond when it comes to that kind of stuff, but, as you know, I watched the original documentary that he produced. I guess it was released in 2020, the one that was 200 hours long. But, and so he went from that to the thing. Well, the imposition of all of the Beatles as younger men at different points, from Sergeant Pepper and from those tapes from the studio, uh, over not over, but inside the live stuff that was being done more recently. And you can't tell. I mean, you can kind of tell where one stops and the other starts because the costuming is so so radically different. But as far as like, there's no wiggly stuff on the video. There's no obvious stuff that like lets you think that these are 60 years apart type things. So the video itself was fascinating, beyond the ability to draw out Lennon's vocal from, I guess like a boombox on a piano or something, where they admitted they'd never been able to get his vocal out because there was so much distortion around the sides. Is fascinating to me, and I guess a little bit scary too, because after Paul McCartney's gone, 60 years after that, they'll be releasing his next album. thanks to AI. But yeah, it's really fascinating.
All right, so let's talk about some of our favorite albums of all time. I made a list of my five, and I thought about it heading into this. And of my top five, I've got two Beatles
Yeah, yeah, I
albums.
figured.
That may seem like an overrepresentation, but I really had a hard time not. I had a hard time not including three on the top five. So let me hear some of your favorite albums
Okay,
before I give you
I think so. Two that I would all there are three that I would always place like co-equal. I can't decide between them which at any time I like the best. Joshua Tree, and then Rich Mullins' Liturgy, Legacy, and a Ragamuffin Band project, and then Jars of Clay's original Jars of Clay project. And I think the reason that I like all of those so much is it doesn't really matter when you play them, they never sound like they're in a specific decade. So you can't, hey, this is a great representation of 80s music, right? I mean, you put Joshua Tree in today, it sounds just as fresh and just as raw and just as normal as the first time you ever played it, which I guess was in the 1980s. Same thing with Jars of Clay. It sounds just as distinct, just as new. Uh, every time that I play it, I listened to it this week actually. And then Rich Mullins, because his music was so different from everything else in the Christian music world. And frankly, it was different than a lot of stuff that was being done because he featured hammered dulcimer and some stuff like that. His lyrics are so poetic that it just never gets old. It never reaches a, oh yeah, well, this was popular back when X was happening. I mean, it's just it's always fresh, it's always good. So those are the top three that I always go to as my favorites of all the rest. Those are the three that are always going to be in the top. Um, I really and I have realized this about myself. I tend to like for some reason I don't know because the next one is going to be John Mark McMillan's Mercury and Lightning album, and I don't have a lot of chicks in my top five music. It's weird. I don't
one.
know. And maybe I think it's because I can sing along to dudes easier than I can sing along to women. And so I just become the affinity becomes more natural for me to be drawn to the music that I can sing along to, even though I can't sing worth a darn. Um, so that's kind of the limitations of some of my preferences. Is it always ends up being dudes or dude groups, and not that many women. But uh, I don't know. I'll have to while you're talking. I'll see if I can come up with a fifth, and I'll come back around to it. But right now, I would just stick with those four.
Okay, so here are mine, and I'll tell you why after I give you the list. Abbey Road by the Beatles, Rubber Soul by the Beatles, Purple Rain from
Hmm.
Prince, Rumors from Fleetwood Mac,
Hmm.
and Jesus Freak from DC Talk.
That's a good list.
All right, so Abbey Road just is the second half of Abbey Road is better than any music any musician has ever released ever. I'm going to go out with hyperbole. I'm going big here.
Man, the lights in
That
my house
second
started
half of
blinking when you said that.
the second half of that album is like almost like one continuous thought,
Interesting.
and it's a masterpiece. And if they hadn't added that weird track that bonus track about Her Majesty, it would have been the perfect way to end the Beatles' legacy. I don't know why they added that, but and then but going on to Rubber Soul, I like Rubber Soul. I think it's one of the top five Beatles albums, but it's in my top five because there's something that connects in my brain to that, and I've used it a lot over the years as a writer. I've been a writer my whole life. Anytime I've had writer's block, I listen to that album, and every single time it breaks that writer's block, and I haven't come up with an explanation for
Hmm,
it. There's just something in there that just connects in my brain and unlocks my
that's
creativity.
awesome.
And then Purple Rain, I think, is just a great album, but it's definitely a period piece.
Mhm.
It sounds like, for most of it, sounds like the 80s, especially songs like Computer Blue. It really sounds like you're using a dot matrix printer and a Mac. But it is a great album. It's a great soundtrack album. I think. Well, on my list, it would be the greatest soundtrack
Mm,
album, but it would be it's certainly a top five album of all time. But most of it does sound dated. Rumors from Fleetwood Mac, just great creativity. Lindsey Buckingham doesn't get enough credit as a guitar
mm.
player. Stevie Nicks, she clearly does get enough credit as a songwriter because she's a two time inductee into the Rock and Roll Hall of
Yeah.
Fame. But somehow she still seems underrated as a songwriter. I would put her. My favorite songwriters of all time would be of popular
Yeah.
songs would be John and Paul, obviously, Dolly Parton, and then Stevie Nicks. So she would be in my top five for songwriters. And then Jesus Freak. I hadn't thought of that album that much until this week when I started preparing for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it several times, and it definitely still holds
Mm.
up. In particular, um, "Just Between You and Me." There's a song on there.
You know we're on a
Just I
podcast,
think
right?
that's the only.
This can't be just between you and me. We're on a podcast.
And listening to that song, and I think that was the only song from that album that actually crossed over to the pop
Mm.
charts, and it was a minor hit, like reaching number 40 or something. But it sounds like it could be released today and be a hit today.
Interesting.
It is really well done. So I listened to the album. It didn't feel nostalgic
Yeah.
when I listened to it. It felt fresh and alive. But one more thing I want to add that's not on my list, but it was on your list from Rich Mullins,
Mm-hmm.
the song "My Deliverer"
Mm-hmm.
from the Liturgy, Legacy, and Ragamuffin Band album after his passing. For my money, that song is the best contemporary Christian song ever.
Interesting.
Again, sort of like Rubber Soul, it unlocked something in my brain,
Yeah.
and it's probably the only song that I can see. And from the very first time I heard that song, I thought I could write a play or a film based on this song because I can see the images so
Wow.
clearly.
Interesting.
And whenever I listen to it, I always listen to it probably three times in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an incredible song.
So while you were going through your list, I did think of a fifth. That would be Vince Guaraldi's Charlie Brown Christmas album. I actually have that on vinyl, not original. It's a reprint, but I listen to it pretty regularly. I love jazz piano, so anything. So I've got Dave Brubeck and Joey Alexander's a favorite. I'm not like so Miles Davis is not. I'm not like into him a lot because trumpet and even Coltrane and sax is it's fine, but I prefer piano. So anything's piano based. But Vince Guaraldi's Linus and Lucy is like one of the greatest tracks ever laid down, in my opinion.
Wow. No, probably the albums I listened to the most, and this was when I was in college. Anybody who's listening to this who went to college with me, I apologize again for triggering these bad memories for you. But "License to Ill" from the Beastie
Oh
Boys
boy,
and Third Stage by Boston. And I listened to those albums so much that I had fellow dorm mates who just complained about. And so, I took my cassettes in my car with my 200-watt speakers, and I made my mobile sound stereo, and I just made everybody in Arkansas hate me rather than just the people on my campus or in
oh that's fantastic, man. So good.
I actually had a box of fuses in my glove compartment because I would blow out the equalizer on my car stereo. I had these little speakers that I got from Radio Shack. They were small speakers, but they were 200 watt. They were like made for your home, and I had them in my car. It's
Oh
probably why I can't
man,
hear anything
man, you could get some tech at Radio Shack.
today.
That's awesome.
But it's interesting that my musical tastes have changed over the years. Like during the 90s, I only listened to contemporary Christian
Yeah,
music.
yeah, same,
So from 1990 to about 2002, I have a sort of a gap in my musical
same here.
knowledge.
Except mine was a
Maybe
little
for
earlier.
that
Mine
reason.
started in the
And
'80s.
okay, but so one of the last non-Christian albums I listened to before that period was Appetite for Destruction, and maybe that's the reason why Guns N' Roses. But that was a great album, and it's still a great album.
My pre-Gap days were all country music,
Okay.
and I had a whole bunch of, Southern gospel albums too, and I can't find any of those albums anywhere. We've moved several times, and I don't know whether I gave them away or lost them or whether they're just buried somewhere here at the house and I haven't been able to find them. But I'd give anything to find a couple of those old Southern gospel albums that I used to listen to when I was a kid.
Yeah, the album that Amy Grant released at around 2000, 2001 of the hymns, that was a pretty spectacular album, I
Cool.
thought. And speaking of Amy Grant, another album I listened to a lot when I was in college was Age to Age. I listened to that every night right before bed.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so
Interesting.
every single night I listened to that.
I had lunch here in Nashville with, oh man, I can't remember his name now. Sean's his first name. I hope he doesn't listen to this. But he had a couple.
Sean Mullins.
Huh?
Sean Mullins.
Mm-mm. No, this was a Christian music, artist back in the day. Toured a little bit with, a couple of the major bands. He'd be like an opening act for some major guys. But he was in the arena for like 10 years or something like that. So he toured and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And he and I met for lunch one day here in Nashville, and I just asked him straight up. I said, "Who is of all the people that you ran across, all the people you were in studio with, all the people that you knew in that scene, that CCM scene, who was the person that stands out in your mind as the most like genuinely authentic follower of Jesus?" And dude, I barely even got the words out of my mouth that he said Amy Grant. There was
Mm.
no hesitation. He didn't even have a second place. It was just like Amy Grant. So I thought that was
Wow.
pretty big.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure my daughter's listening to this episode now, and when she hears Amy Grant, she always thinks, "Weren't you going to marry Amy Grant?" That's why she thinks. Yeah, I told her that like Amy Grant missed out on her opportunity when I was 20 something years old. And they have the same birthday, so that's her connection to Amy.
Oh man, that's funny. That's awesome.
All right, let's switch over a little bit to our bucket list for places that we want to visit someday. So I'll let you start with your list.
Antarctica. I've been blessed in my life to be on every continent except Antarctica, and I've researched how to get there. And apparently, there's cruises now. They've like just made a money making thing out of this whole thing. But as far as like actually going and staying there for a week or something like that, being in the scientific villages and stuff like that, it's very very difficult. And Antarctica is the cities where they do exploration. So the science camps basically are managed by different countries. So America manages part, and I forget there's like four countries that manage a sliver of Antarctica, and then there's some outlying islands. I think there's a whole different country manages those. But anyway, so each one of those little camps, I think, has a chapel or a church, but each country is responsible for who pastors or preaches or teaches at those chapels. And so for the American side, you have to go through the Coast Guard. And I don't know if you have to be in the Coast Guard or if you just have to be a Coast Guard chaplain or appointed by or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so I gave up on my dream of going to Antarctica, but I would love to round out my visitation of all the continents by getting to Antarctica one day. Um, After that, I'd love to go to the Alps. I've been over them in an airplane, but I've never been to them on the ground. And then Sonia and I would love to go to Ireland at some point. I know that's kind of everybody wants to do a thing there, but she has an ancestry there that's so far back that we wouldn't know them, they would never know her. But part of her ancestry is a family that started a pottery years and years and years, centuries or whatever. And the pottery still exists, and they still make and sell pottery. So we would love at some point there to go and just show up and say, "Hey, can we get the friend family discount or something?" Uh,
I actually have a similar story on my bucket list for Ireland,
all right,
but it's not from me particularly. It's my grandchildren.
okay,
Um, my son-in-law, his family name is Clabby. Excuse me. and they're actually a Clabby, Northern Ireland, and that his ancestors founded,
Wow.
and some of his relatives are still there. So I would love to go there with my grandchildren someday and just tour and discover this little town of Clabby, Northern
Oh,
Ireland.
that's interesting. Yeah. In the I guess in the States, the only place that really is that I can think of that's like a place I would really love I'd love to see the Grand Canyon. I've been within 90 minutes of it one year at a meeting, and I didn't pull pull the time to go and see it. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Victoria Falls in Africa. I guess I don't Zimbabwe, is that where Victoria Falls is? Um,
I actually don't know.
yeah. But I don't have a ton of places that are like bucket list travel items, but those few are like pretty big.
Well, you mentioned having gone to all the continents except for Antarctica. I've been to all the ones that count, which means I've only been in North America.
Man, you're
I haven't,
yeah.
I haven't been
I
anywhere.
want all your
I'm,
listeners to give you just like really, really strong feedback on that.
I know that was sarcasm in case it doesn't come through on the audio portion of this. This will be released on video too, and hopefully they'll be able to see it there, one format or another. Hopefully
Yeah,
the
yeah, that'd be
sarcasm.
great.
But I know that certain people think that way. But I don't happen to be
Yeah.
one of those people in reality. But it sounded like it would be funny. At least in my head, it did. But on my other list, it's a short list. I mentioned Clabby, Northern Ireland. Nigeria is a
Really?
place I'd like to
Okay.
visit. My Having spent a lot of time doing genealogy research, the largest segment of my ancestry is from Nigeria, and it's so segmented that the largest segment is about 22%
Wow.
for me,
Wow.
and I would like to go there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that one of the and I think there are like four 13 or 14 different in the latest ancestry DNA results. They update them every couple of years,
Okay.
and the latest one dropped about a month ago. And I've got about 13 or so nationalities included
Wow.
in my ancestry, and they're mostly probably of the 13, probably 9 or 10 or African
Mhm.
countries, and Nigeria happens to be the biggest one. But the biggest one outside of Africa is Scotland with about 10%. So
Wow.
that's a place I would like to go and discover my roots there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But see, I won't try to dress the part because that would look really
Carry a bagpipe,
weird.
man. They won't know.
Bagpipe and a kilt. People would. I wouldn't even be able to get on the plane. They consider me some kind of a threat, an intellectual threat, if nothing else. And then my final place is just anywhere. Since the only other country I've ever been outside of the United States is Mexico. So I just want to go anywhere.
Mm.
Today would be a good day for that.
Is it not nice there?
You mean in Mexico?
No, in Texas.
Oh, it's fine here. I just haven't been anywhere
Oh,
else outside of the United States. Yeah, don't start with the messing with Texas stuff because I will mess with you.
well, hashtag mess with Texas.
No. All right. Anyway, before I say something that's going to get me censored by the FCC, let's move on to some of the favorite events that we've attended live. So, what are some events that you've attended in person?
When I was really young, maybe 8 or 9 years old, my dad took my sister and I don't think my mother went with us to see Johnny Cash at the Atlanta Civic Center, and the Statler brothers opened for him. And so it was like two of the groups that I'd heard, all of my life because my dad was a fan. The funny thing about it was my dad had, and probably they still have, this small portable cassette recorder, and it had an external mic with a wire. And he took that thing into the concert and recorded the entire concert on two or three cassettes that he also had just by holding the microphone up. and that would have
The
been
original bootlegging.
dude, tell me about it. So that's 50 years ago. So I found that tape a couple of years ago, and it still plays, and it doesn't sound
Wow.
terrible. It's the most amazing thing. And so I found Johnny Cash singing "Ring of Fire" or something, I can't remember. But anyway, so I've and am planning to get it transferred onto CD at some point, so I'll at least have a record or a digital copy or something. So that's one. There was a concert that I attended, Mylon Lefevre and Broken Heart in Atlanta, also at the Civic Center, believe it or not. And it was the Crack the Sky tour. And that one song, everybody in that place on their feet singing as loud as they could, basically for Jesus to come back, was really amazing. And then a third one that comes to mind is I went to a POD concert. So my oldest daughter, was a huge POD fan, and this would have been probably 2002 because their big album came out in 2001. Came out on September 11th, actually, and they came to Center Stage Theater in Atlanta, and it's a cube with a stage at the bottom. And so my daughter and her friend were in the mosh pit all night long, and my daughter was 5'1" and weighed every bit of 85 pounds, and I couldn't even see her most of the time. And when they got to the song "Alive" in that place, I just looked around at all of the like young adults, teenagers, parents, some who were like, I mean, like pouring out their souls. It was so transcendent. It wasn't even a concert moment. It was completely transcendent, as spiritual as any kind of revival meeting, I guess, that I've ever been in. And I mean, I've never experienced anything in a concert like that before at all. Um, and then a non-concert thing that comes to mind is what was I going to say here? Non-concert thing. Oh, I got to see Larry Bird, and I got to see the Celtics in the prime of Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and those guys. And I was a Hawks fan, and so my friends and I would go and we'd buy the $2 tickets, and then at halftime we'd move down to the seats where people had left down to the bottom. And I saw Tree Rollins give Larry Bird a bloody nose one night, uh, fighting for a rebound. So it's Tree Rollins and Eddie Johnson, Dan Roundfield. I mean, all the '80s guys, '70s and '80s guys. And my friend, whose name was Wally, did not. I mean, he would do anything if he thought he could get away with it. And so we had gone to a Hawks game one night, and we had moved down at halftime. And all of a sudden, I look up and Wally's gone. I mean, he's just not there. And so we just keep watching the game. And all of a sudden, I see him, and he is now we're 17 years old, and he is on the floor in the photographer's box on the floor, sitting down amongst all the photographers right there courtside, where they're all taking pictures of the basketball game, and Wally's just sitting down there with them like he belongs. You know, he didn't even have a camera. He's just sitting.
He didn't even pretend.
It was. I mean, for all I know, he's sitting in front of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda because they were always courtside. Um, and then, I mean, if you want to do like get serious stuff, the birth of my kids is all up there, and the struggles that Sonya went through to birth two of them for sure, and one of them was a lot easier than the other two. One of them, she almost died, and that was a moment in time.
Wow.
Uh, but event type stuff, yeah, those are the things that come to mind that
Wow.
that not everyone has experienced.
Yeah, most of my favorite memories of events were baseball related,
Yeah.
which probably also doesn't surprise me, just like the Beatles list. I've been to hundreds of Astros games, maybe even thousands. I
Wow.
haven't counted. Well, either been to in person or certainly watched. I know I watched thousands. I may have watched tens of thousands of games because I watch every game every year. and I've been an Astros fan my whole life.
Wow.
But I've never been to a playoff game or a World Series game. So that's something I would probably like to add on my bucket list. But so all my best memories are during the regular season.
I thought did you not go to
But
a playoff game a couple years ago?
no, I've never been to a playoff
Wow, I
game.
thought
I just can't. In my mind, I just can't justify the
Oh,
cost
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's just outrageously expensive. But memories. In 1979, Ken Forrest pitched a no hitter that I saw live. That's the only no hitter I've ever seen
That's
live.
awesome.
So that was pretty cool. I was like 12 years old, I think, at the time. I saw Nolan Ryan's first home game in an Astros uniform.
That's pretty cool.
I was sitting in the center field seat. Um, he was facing. It was against the Dodgers. I remember that because Don Sutton was pitching for the Dodgers, and then the next year they were teammates for the Astros. But two Hall of Famers going against each other. Nolan Ryan, who had been in the American League where he didn't have to bat,
Yeah.
hadn't had to bat for like 7 years. His first at bat, he hits a home run to center field against Don Sutton,
Oh, man.
and, and the ball came right up there where I was sitting. I didn't catch it because it wasn't close enough for me to catch, but and then to this day I still haven't gotten a ball. I've been to hundreds of baseball games and I've never gotten a foul ball, home run ball, any ball. And I've probably gone to half a dozen minor league games, and I've probably gotten half a dozen baseballs.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I've been to hundreds of major league games, and I've not gotten even one. And then watching again baseball related, but non Astros. Watching my son play baseball as he was growing up and going through high school, and I lived and breathed those at bats or moments on the
Yeah,
field with
yeah.
him because I know what he how hard he worked
Yeah.
to get to the levels where he got. And baseball wasn't his passion. He was just a good athlete, and he played baseball because I loved baseball.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was doing it, and he told me this as he got older
Yeah.
that he did it for me. And he was a really good soccer player, and he gave up soccer as he went into high school and focused on baseball
Mm.
and made the high school baseball team and was recruited to play in college and hurt his shoulder his freshman year, so he never really got to do that. But he's an engineer, so I guess I'll forgive him for not becoming a
That's pretty
professional baseball
substantial, though. There's not a lot of guys that would I mean, there's a lot of guys who endure, their father's, dashed dreams because their dad rides them like a, broke down mule, but, there's not a lot of guys who will take on their father's joy, just so it'll be a connection, with their dad. That's pretty substantial from your son.
It was, and it was a joy, and it was a connection. And there were times when it seemed like the only connection,
Mm,
but it was a pretty strong connection, and it kept us bonded until we built other connections.
that's awesome.
We would drive to games. We lived in Maryland at the time, and we would I don't know how many times we would drive to Pennsylvania for tournament games that he
Yeah,
had,
yeah.
or to Virginia. He slept in the car most of the time, but but it was time for us to bond, and I'd watch him warm up before the game, practice, and then we'd go out after the game and get something to eat and talk about what he had done or what he had to do the next week and
Yeah.
school stuff. It was a really strong bonding experience, and I hope the memories for him are as good as they are for me. And I still the last game he played, official game he played, was in 2017, and so I still miss going to games.
Mm.
I drove, and I am not exaggerating. I figured this out at one point when he was playing soccer and baseball at the same time. There was a period when I averaged 1,100 miles a week
What?
driving. I
Wow, man.
bought a brand new car that had 30,000 miles on it in just a few months.
That's
It was
like,
crazy the amount of driving.
that's like a new car warranty a year.
Yeah, it was. It was crazy, but I miss it.
Yeah,
I didn't like it at the
yeah.
time, but I miss it now.
That's awesome.
But again, 2017, so changing to concerts like you on your list. 2017, I went to an Imagine Dragons concert in Washington D.C. with my then girlfriend, and had an engagement ring in my pocket at the concert.
Wow.
And and then I thought, yeah, the setting just doesn't seem right. So I didn't propose to her there. And then the next day, I took her to the harbor, Annapolis Harbor, and proposed to her. And thankfully, she said yes. And we're coming up on 5 years of marriage and
I've seen Imagine
living
Dragons,
down
but
here
it
in
wasn't
Texas
for
now.
marriage.
They're pretty good. They're a pretty good group.
Mhm.
I'm not much into pop music these days, but they're certainly at the top of my list.
Yeah, they're good.
But one other concert memory, and this is a recent memory just from last year. My oldest daughter bought tickets for she and I to go see Paul McCartney.
Okay.
And he was playing his only show in Texas last year, and we drove from San Antonio to Fort Worth and saw Paul McCartney, and that was awesome. Again, another bonding experience, father and child. And she's a huge Beatles fan, so she wasn't just doing this for me.
Yeah,
She was really excited to go and see him.
that's awesome.
And I think when she got married in 2015, I believe it was. I think she wrote a letter to Paul McCartney inviting him to the wedding.
Wow.
Of
That'd be
course, he
a
wasn't there
bucket
because
list
it would have
item.
been she had several famous people she invited to the wedding, but that was a pretty awesome experience going. And his show was incredible. The thing that stood out to me was this guy he was just a couple months away from turning 80 last year. He didn't have an opening act. He played for about 2.5 hours
Wow.
with no breaks.
Now
He did
does he still
40
sing
songs a
lead
set.
on every song, or does he have somebody that sings on some of the songs?
He sang lead on every single song.
Wow.
His voice isn't as strong,
Yeah,
obviously, but it's still pretty good. I saw a Hall and Oates concert probably 12 years ago, and Daryl Hall couldn't sing the lead on some of his songs anymore.
yeah,
He was much younger than Paul.
yeah.
But Paul sang every song nonstop, no breaks, for 2.5 hours.
That's really incredible.
So those are my best memories of things I've attended live and in person. So I got one more quick question for you. Excuse me, before we start to wind this down. What are some of your favorite Thanksgiving memories? And that could be food, music, family, football, or anything else that you might think
Yeah, so, my wife makes a killer, jalapeno cornbread dressing, which, I look forward to every year. My mom makes sweet potato casserole with toasted, like, browned marshmallows on top, which is excellent. My mother-in-law makes sweet potato casserole with this brown sugar and pecan concoction on top of it. So my dream at the marriage supper of the lamb is just to have, one side of my plate with my mom's sweet potato casserole and the other side of my plate with my mother-in-law's sweet potato casserole. I look forward to either one of those each year. But we also did kind of family football for a number of years. This was on my mom's side of the family. We tended to spend more Thanksgivings with them. I think because my aunt had a place big enough for the family, there were six brothers and sisters in my mom's generation, then the kids, and so it could get to be a pretty big group. And so my aunt tended to host us at Thanksgiving, and so we had the afternoon touch football game, and my uncles trying to relive their Uncle Rico days when they could throw that pigskin half a mile, and if coach had just put them
of.
in it,
Over the mountains.
yeah, coach just put them in at halftime, they could have won state. Um, but I have related to Thanksgiving specifically. Those are probably the biggest memories that I have is from growing up are those touch football games and my uncles trying to relive their childhood.
Yeah, I think everybody's got some of those types of memories, or have witnessed some of their family members try to relive those.
Witness it, yeah,
There's, yeah, the things that never happened except in their heads,
yes.
like Al Bundy with his 4 touchdowns or whatever it was. Some of my best memories were going fishing with two of my best friends, and Dean and Steve, and we started this in high school. And we would go fishing down in the Gulf of
Mm,
Mexico the day after Thanksgiving. every year, and that was. And obviously, it faded out because as you get married and start having kids, those things sort of go by the wayside. But those are still some of my best
That's
memories. Is
awesome.
going down there, the three of us, and hanging out, and whether we caught anything or not, it was always a really good time. Just driving down, getting up early in the morning because of course fish have to fish only get up before
Yes,
sunrise, and
right.
they go to bed. They go to bed by 10 a.m. I think is what we thought. But so we drive down there, go fishing, and then fish for a few hours, and then come back home.
Yeah,
But those are some great memories for me.
that's fantastic.
It's so weird that I've known those guys now for like I met Dean I think when I was 11 or 12, and I met Steve when I was about 16 or
Are
17.
you guys still in touch with
So
each other?
with one more than the
Okay,
other, but yeah, we're still connected,
cool.
and it's just it's been pretty awesome that meeting those guys that early in my life, and they've had it's a huge
Yeah.
influence, like huge influence, and I could take a whole separate episode just talking about the influence they
Mm,
had in my life. And I actually did mention them in my first book. But so those are some of my best memories. Fishing the day after
that's
Thanksgiving.
awesome. So and then on the way back
All right,
and then on the way
so
back, y'all hit the Black Friday sales, right?
I've been out one time in my whole life for Black Friday sale just to see what it was
Yeah.
like, and I thought, okay, that's enough. I don't ever need to do this again,
Man, when my
ever.
kids were younger, we did the Black Friday early morning, stand in line, and we did the, day after Christmas, like, when everything is on clearance. We did those things for several years in a row, but the weirdest one that I ever did was my dad. This was during one of the that short stretch where stores started opening on Thanksgiving afternoon, and,
Mm,
my dad got a sale paper or something from Walmart, and they were gonna have a TV on sale, and it was only gonna be on sale on Thanksgiving afternoon. It wasn't gonna be on sale on Black Friday, so he and I had to go down to their local Walmart, stand in line, and get up there, and he only got a ticket for it. He didn't even get the TV. He's got a ticket. He had to go back later to get the TV. I guess he still got the thing. I don't know, but I was like, in my mind, I'm like, how am I out here with this 80-year-old man on Thanksgiving afternoon when we should be watching football? And I'm standing in line at Walmart on Thanksgiving. And thankfully, they got enough blowback. They quit. I think they quit doing that after about 3 years. I wasn't very
yeah, how are you
thankful.
going to
I
watch
wasn't very
football if you don't
thankful
have
for
your
that
80
particular
inch?
experience.
Yeah, how are you going to watch football if you didn't have that new 80-inch crystal 4K TV that cost $22?
And that's exactly what it
That's
was.
what. All right, Marty. I appreciate this conversation. This is really a pleasure
Oh,
to me.
thank
So
you.
Marty Duren has been our guest today. So thanks, Marty, for being
Thank you, Mel.
here. So that's it for today's edition of Real Life and Other Fantasies. Join us again next week for another great storytelling adventure. Until we meet again, don't forget to share some light wherever you go.